Okay, stand by, please. Let's get it underway. Very shortly. I think they're taking it now, or will be in the next sort of quarter of an hour. Okay, it is. It's going to happen. Very quiet, please. And cue Jean-Paul.
BBC TV's drama series Secret Army in rehearsal in the television studio on the 8th of July 1977. Secret Army tells a fictionalized version of how Allied aircrew escaped from occupied Europe in the Second World War with the aid of the Belgian and French underground. In the studio, all the pieces of the production jigsaw fit together for the first and last time. This is the culmination of months of apparently unconnected activity. The casting of artists, the building up of character in rehearsal, the planning and shooting of film sequences. How was all this brought about? What went on behind the scenes? Jerry Glaister.
Well, I'm, as producer, responsible for selecting the directors that I'm going to work with. And one selects the directors in relation to the type of show you're going to do. Now, once they have been selected, I cast, as producer, I cast the principal regular characters. Then, with them, I discuss the script at length, and we are agreed of what the aims are, what the intention of the script is, how we're going to treat it. We discuss the casting of the non-regular parts that come into each script separately. And from there on, he acts totally on his own, with reference to me as required over things to do with finance and filming and so on. But he directs the actors at rehearsal. He directs the cameras and the actors in the studio. I go to outside runs when he's ready to show me the thing, and I make my comments to him.
I quite like late scripts because it means I have an influence over them. If the script is early, as they were in actual fact on this programme, they were incredibly early, which is very unusual for television. The director has less influence, and I didn't really need to have the influence in this particular case because I'm doing some superb scripts. Growing Up is the best television script I've ever worked on. The first thing to do is to start casting. This is a slow but exciting process, and it is all important. If you cast it well, if you have, I think probably 50% of the success ingredient is having a good script, 40% is casting it well, and the other 10% is what the director can do.
Now look, Ken, about the boy at 4, growing up, it's the key part. He's got a great sincerity, great reality. We don't want to have somebody who looks like he's acting the part. You know, we've tried various people. What's the next move?
Well, did you see Where Adam Stood by
yeah.
Potter? Fantastic.
Yeah.
It was virtually a 90-minute duologue between Alan Bedell and a little boy called Max Harris, who's quite remarkable. I'd like to have him play the part.
Well, he's absolutely superb. Can we, I mean, what are his dates? Can we get him?
Yes, he is available. I spoke to his father yesterday. His father's willing, and his work permit has not run out, so he should be all right.
And we can get him over to Belgium?
Yes, yes. Means going to court and things like that in order to swear that I'm not inducting him into white slavery, things like that. I've got to go to Bow Street Magistrates Court. I think I can faithfully swear to that.
Okay, well, all things being equal, I agree with you. He's absolutely dead right. And if we don't get him, we have to start again?
Yes, I will have to either go around some classrooms and interview people, but it means much more hard work from my point of view because it means I've got to spend much more time looking for it.
Yeah.
It would be rather nice if I can get a readily available one.
Yes, just bear with us because there's a lot happening and it all takes a bit of time, as you realise. Right.
We have your white shirt on. We're not good doing it.
Yeah.
And I'll just do that.
No, don't worry. If you wouldn't mind, it's just to kill this little audio one. Say again, please, Ken. Is Derry Hawes on the floor?
Well, obviously the Education Committee lays down shorter hours for me to work, which are, usually something like 10 till 5, although I haven't actually worked that late so far on this show. And of course I have to have a break in mid-morning, things like that, and 3 hours schooling.
Thank you very much.
You have to have a chaperone. Takes you from the door and travels on the underground with you and generally looks after you, and have a tutor, of course, who gives you the 3 hours lessons.
I think the moment you get any acting, the truth of the character flies out of the window. You don't want acting on the box, you want being. And therefore it's very important to get this truth, and it's a very difficult thing to create, because the older we get, the further we get away from the state of childhood, it's more difficult to pretend to be someone else.
But it isn't fair, is it? Them telling me what to do. It was me that found you.
Yeah, well, it was like that in war. Taking orders and that.
When I grow up, I'm going to be one of the resistance leaders. I'm going to give the orders. Well, I'd like to see myself famous actor.
Secret Army's famous actor is Bernard Hepton, Cranmer in Henry VIII, the Commandant in Colditz, and recently winner of the Royal Television Society's Gold Medal. In early March 1977, only a month before filming begins, he's just agreed to play the leading role of the Belgian cafe proprietor, Albert.
I know very little about Albert at the moment, and about building a character around what I know. This is the first attempt at that, because I've got a funny feeling in the back of my mind, a vision that all Belgians of my age all have big moustaches. And I've got this very strange image at the back of my mind. And I said, well, I've got time to grow it, and I won't need it till the middle of April, by which time it'll be very big and bushy. So I can always shave it off if the producer doesn't like it. But I think, now that's not building a character, it's just sort of getting the feel of it, really.
Yes?
Right.
Rehearsals many weeks later.
A boy? A 10-year-old boy?
Yes. Found the airman on his way home from school.
Well, we'll have to send someone up there tonight. We can't afford to leave it to a boy. What I do know about Albert is, yes, he's a hero, because all those people on the escape lines were heroes.
When she arrived at Paris, quite late in the evening, the lorry drew up outside a block of flats, and as the tailboard was let down, so about a dozen young French students surrounded the tailboard to screen us from anybody in the streets. And this was the last time that I saw this great man, Maurice Dupuy, with whom we'd lived for 5 weeks. The last time I saw him alive. Henri de Brossard was driving the lorry, and another very emotional scene was when Maurice Dupuy took my hand, and he took Junior's hand, and he held them together in his. And he said, with tears streaming down his face, will you promise me that when you get back to your country, you will help liberate my country from these awful people? And he pointed down the road to where some Germans were guarding some headquarters. And we both said yes. If we had a chance, we would come back. Now, this is the last time we saw this great man alive, because 2 days after, the Gestapo raided the house, and he died a horrible death in Dakar.
There were a lot of young girls, let's say girls about 17, who made themselves look much younger. Some of them looked about 12. And they conducted the men from one place to another, to the station, or into a church, or from the church to the station, whatever happened. And this was a very good thing. The Germans, of course, couldn't believe this. They didn't ever suspected these girls at all, because they looked so young.
A terrible cold, this girl. He said, she speaks awfully good English. And he said, introduced me to her, and he said, you're going home to her flat to stay with her. Well, I didn't see my navigator again. I just shook hands with him and said, I'll go and see your mother if I get home. Now, I went with this young girl, and before we went outside this hospital, she said to me, Now, you and my husband, you're deaf and dumb, we're travelling on the metro. There'll be lots of Germans travelling on the metro. She said, you stand near me. She said, if a German speaks to me, she said, I speak German. If a German speaks to me, she said, I'll do all the talking. She said, don't be afraid.
There was one more, coming to Gibraltar, there was one more line run by a woman in Toulouse. An old lady, an old cross patch, a horrible old thing she seemed to be, but she was a wonderful character, named Françoise, who unfortunately is now dead. She was never caught, and though she had the Gestapo headquarters quite near to her house, a little flat, they never seemed to suspect her. Perhaps I used to think they didn't suspect her at her age any more than they did the young girls in Brussels.
We were arrested on January the 3rd, 1942. And it happened this way. We had this big house with an enormous tourelle that you see in France, and it was fitted up with aerials, and it was a perfect place for transmissions. And so we received Pat O'Leary's operator, you see, who came and made frequent transmissions from us. And on this particular day, I was giving my babies breakfast. He was 16 months old. And the door burst open. 7 great Germans burst through that door. They made me stand up, and they slapped me to make sure that I wasn't armed. And thank goodness I'd got the baby in my arm. It didn't show that I was trembling, but it looked as though I was jiggetting the baby up and down, you see. And they shouted to the other men, search the house. The house was entirely encircled with Germans with a Tommy gun every few yards. And I was terrified.
Whilst I was with Pat, the bulk of the time I spent indoors up in the loft. But on occasions I did get out into town. I even got a haircut. I used to take little Michel, push him along in the pram, and Pat seemed quite happy. It was perfectly safe. I remember on one occasion as a divertissement that she suggested that I should go along to a wedding. And being Pat, she thought she'd cock a snook at the Germans and even got me to be a witness at the wedding.
In Secret Army, actress Jan Francis has the task of recreating that sort of defiance and heroism. She plays Lisa, codename Yvette.
Well, at the moment, I've received some of the scripts, but I haven't received all of them. And I haven't received, as yet, the first script, which is obviously going to be very important because it's going to set up the character for me, or to a certain extent. And so, hopefully, when I've got all the scripts there, I'll be able to see there will be threads running through that will give me a clue. At the moment, I've got vague ideas as to what she's like, but I'm deliberately not fixing anything in my mind because it's very hard to eradicate those. On the initial reading of the scripts that I've received, Yvette's character is very different, or her personality is very different from mine. I know that. And I worried an awful lot about this because she's immensely strong and I can panic sometimes. And she never seems to. She's a marvellous organiser, and I wouldn't say I was. She's rather quiet, and I'm certainly not quiet. And I thought, how am I going to cope with that? But in fact, thinking about it, it's quite interesting to be cast very differently from your own personality. And I think, in fact, better performances can come from that because you're thinking very hard and you have to go into it a lot deeper.
The first thing I look for is actually what the author says in the script about a character. And in a one-off play, of course, it's very easy because everything is said about the character. If it's a good play, everything is said about the character. And you look for what other people say about him, not what he says about himself. I do anyway. And at the moment, I haven't really got that in front of me. So I'm just gathering ideas letting them sift through and waiting for the next script so that I can put another bit of jigsaw in. But the point is that I've got to do this very quickly before we start rehearsals. Because one of the great difficulties of doing a series is that you have to make all those decisions before you start. There's no point in actually starting a character and doing 3 or 4 episodes and then say, oh my God, I think this character should be bald.
When you are
2 leading artists in search of a character. The missing pieces of the jigsaw will only emerge weeks later in rehearsal, working closely with director Ken Ives.
And I won't see it at all. Much more at him, more annoyance at what he stands for, because this is a perpetual bane in your life, isn't it?
Yes, what you said
They're
yesterday,
not trained properly.
To link it with a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I think, Jan, don't let the bread and everything, which is fine, that's very good, dissipate the strength of what you're saying. Don't throw away what you're saying. I think you must, in a way, top what Bernard is saying. You are in charge of Lifeline and you don't want him doing anything at all, and that strength must come out. I understand what it's like for an actor to, at 9:30 in the morning, to get up and start pretending to be someone else. It's like taking your clothes off in public. It's very embarrassing. It's a very painful process, and it needs a lot of courage. There's always on film, before an actor hears the word action, there's a butterfly sort of swimming around in his stomach. And if the director understands this, then he's going to get much more out of the actor.
And if actors look for support to the director in turn relies on a close-knit production team. Producer's assistant, Pat Priest,
Brian Glover, the German.
production assistant or PA, Derek Nelson, and assistant floor manager, Carolyn Montague.
Well, the PA's main job is to translate the monies we have into facilities so that the director can, in fact, get the best possible use for his show. And the main things are, once you've got the script, is to break it down into the locations required and try and block them into days to estimate how many days we're actually going to use. One of the other main factors is, in fact, to try and keep within the budgets, which is obviously very important.
Keeping control of the budget is the particular headache of the production unit manager, Frank Pendlebury.
It usually transpires that, in fact, the scripts are possibly over-ambitious, and it is up to oneself to say, well, this is possible or not, and to try and be constructive and suggest possible cuts and areas in which one could save money.
Ken has already filmed for 2 weeks in corners of English fields that will be forever Belgium. Now, he and the production team are setting up the next scheduled filming, a week on location in Belgium itself.
There's always the night time, isn't there, Pat? This is the filming.
Yeah, this is our first day on the when we kick off in Belgium, which is the 10th.
Yeah.
And these are the normal cards I'm going to make up. Okay. Starting off with the village street, which is a fairly easy one. See Thomas and the policeman. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, they can be dressing the playground and square area, which is our most important area on that day.
We've got plastic cobblestones coming.
Yep, I believe so.
Unbelievably, they don't have plastic cobblestones in Belgium, which is surprising. So we have a horse trough or something like that, and the signs. Carolyn, you've got the signs for saying it's the Gestapo headquarters.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a nice little sequence to start off with.
And they operate a 12-hour day in Belgium, apparently. So if we start at what time are we starting on occasion?
Well, it should be around about 9-ish.
This is 12 hours from the actual studio.
Leaving base,
so we're leaving base at 8. So we've got to be back there at 8.
Right.
And we've got to kill the lady.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've got to do it in daylight now, which is a great pity because of expense.
Before setting off to kill the lady, Ken Ives has a meeting with producer Jerry Glaister. Jerry has been keeping an eye on the film rushes that Ken has sent back from several English locations.
Got it all in.
Well, so far, I must say, they look absolutely super, Ken.
Good.
What about dear old Bill? Was he advising you well?
Superbly. I mean, I wish I'd had him there the first week. So I was very pleased to have him there for the actual digging of the hole and everything, because he himself, as you know, had been in a ditch for a few, I think something like 36 hours.
At the end of that first night, according to my training book, I looked for a place to sleep. And the training book was very much to the point. They said always try to find a place to sleep during the day where no one would find you, or where you wouldn't expect anyone to find you. And in my case, I remember that the best place was a bramble bush, preferably a bramble bush in a newly planted copse that hadn't been cleared. And that's what I found on the first night.
Eventually we heard this lorry, and this man Labovar came with his son, put us on the lorry, covered us with sacks, and drove us to his farmhouse. It was there we were closeted in a room for 5 days, during which time Labovar worked very hard, and he got a doctor to see us. This doctor came ostensibly to see his little son Francois, but because the Germans were tapping all sorts of lines and that in those days. If you sent for a vet, the Germans knew within 10 minutes that you've got a vet coming to your farm.
Local inhabitants, there were two people who shoved a bottle of beer and a loaf of bread in my hands and said, "Run." So I ran into the nearest woods. And I gathered I was to hang on there and somebody would come and see me later on. And in fact, Georges Lemaitre, he came along around about midnight and we traipsed off and I hid in a chicken coop for 2 or 3 days.
In the middle of the night, Mr. Labovar took us to this derelict farmhouse. There were no doors downstairs, no windows. It's where he kept all his old baskets for his farm and sacks and agricultural implements and that sort of thing. The only habitable room was a room upstairs, and he used to bring food to us about 10:30 every night. It was usually an enamel bowl of beans or an enamel bowl of leeks. We had a little tin can to make ourselves comfortable during the day. When he came at night, we went out one at a time. We were on the main road. German lorries were passing all day and all night. And one of them his son used to keep watch whilst we just had a bit of exercise walking up and down.
I was only asleep for a very short period of time when I was awakened by somebody shouting at me in German. I didn't know who it was, obviously. What had happened is that the farmer had contacted the escape route. And, people that knew the escape route, and I was being approached by the first contact of the escape route, and had I been a German or something like that, I would have woken up, no doubt, shouting in German, or reacting in German. And of course I woke up and spoke in English, said what's going on, and the next thing I was clasped by the hand and said, "Come with us." And I was taken back into Namur, and I went to a monastery, which was a safe house. And that was really my introduction into the escape route.
The escape route for the air crew in episode 4 of Secret Army starts in a mining village near Liège in Belgium. On the 12th of May 1977, Ken Ives and his film crew are beginning to reconstruct, as authentically as possible, one of the dramatic events of the early war years, a house-to-house search by German soldiers.
That'll do.
Clear?
We're running.
Okay, so right-hand side of the. Okay. Right, I'm going to favour to the right as we go down. Okay, the soldiers.
That's fine, thank you, Andrew.
Godfrey, you don't see people on top of the
right
road
as well, do the same thing.